Hey guys, Loco here, back with another Loco Reacts video. This one is called Rate of Change Dev Diaries. It's from February 3rd, 2017, so it's from almost 2 years ago. It's been really interesting going back and checking out the dev diaries and seeing how Riot's philosophies have stayed the same or changed over the time. The thing about core philosophies and game design pillars are if they are good, then they should stay the same. But as the scene adapts and changes, and as your player base also changes, it's okay for those to change. So let's see how much of it stayed the same and how much is different in terms of how Riot view change for the game, or the rate of change. Holy shit, now the word change has no meaning for me anymore because I said it so many times. Anyways, let's get started with the video.
Hey guys, Greg Street. I'm one of the designers in League of Legends.
The lead designer.
Back to answer more questions about our development philosophy and how we think about League and why we do some of the crazy things that we do. So we're out of preseason now, and a question a lot of you asked us was about rate of change and how much change does League need, and do we change the game too much or too fast, which is all super relevant and the kind of stuff we talk about all the time.
So Riot's change is actually very frequent for a competitive game. You will rarely see competitive games patch on a 2-week basis. Usually it's like a month or 2 months where the game stays the same and there aren't major updates done. But Riot is updating the game on a 2-week basis, which means it's very quick to kind of correct some of the incorrections that might come from the patch being released in an imbalanced state. So it does two things. One, it makes it so anything that's new discovered and like uberly broken, Riot can handle very quickly. But two, it doesn't leave a lot of room for kind of long-term adaptation. So there's games like StarCraft and Smash that basically never change and never get patched. And in those games, matchups and how people play certain characters or certain races have gotten so meticulous and so detailed and so well figured out. Where League, on the other hand, because it's changing every 2 weeks, it's very hard for people to figure things out to tiny minute details in terms of matchups, because those are up to change so many of the times.
So let me dig into that a little bit. So going way back, like way before my time, to the genesis of League of Legends, Mark Merrill and Brandon Beck.
Thank you, Mark Merrill, for making sure everyone here has a job. Thank you for making sure Dom has a job. Thank you for basically feeding my family and allowing me to exist. Bless you.
We're talking about the kind of games they like to play and how frustrated they got playing a competitive game, because that's the kind of games they play, when the game would stop being updated. Like, the development team probably knew there was an exploit, or not even exploit, just like a strategy that always trumps the other strategies, and it felt like everyone is using this, the developers probably know about it, why don't they fix it?
This is really common for old school games. I'm not sure how young the viewer base that is watching, but older games rarely got patched, and they basically didn't get patched until like an expansion for the game came out, or like game 2 of that game came out. So yeah, we're so used to just complaining on forums or complaining on Twitter and the game being changed on a weekly or a monthly basis, but it's an extremely new concept in terms of like history of computer gaming in general.
And so they really wanted the game they made, which ultimately became League of Legends, to be a game that was curated, that was something we constantly looked at and updated. And if there was a pain point or frustration or a strategy that couldn't be beat or a strategy that was all anyone used, Riot would step in and try to fix that so that players didn't have to go too long. We know we have a lot of you guys play League, maybe every day, maybe several times a day. And so even though we do try to patch on a, on a 2-week cadence, that could feel like a long time when there's like a champ in the game that's really frustrating to deal with. So overall, that leads to our philosophy of, let's get in there and fix the stuff that's broken.
Oh, here's the thing though. Before like all these kind of websites came out, right? Like op.gg, u.gg, all these websites that told you win rates of champions. Like there could be champions with extremely high win rate, but people wouldn't know about them, and people wouldn't just all go to like these sites and look up what's the best and just follow the cookie cutter builds. Like people would actually have to experiment for themselves. So the community as a whole has gotten a lot better and a lot more faster and more efficient at identifying what's broken. And even when they identify what's broken, it's what's broken for solo queue, right? Whenever you play solo queue, that's what you're being tested on. And 99% of the League player base will only ever play solo queue. But for the 1% that does play competitive, or how much like of a small minority that does play competitive, champions are balanced very differently. I mean, there's champions notoriously that are hard to balance for pro play compared to solo queue, like Akali, Rise, or even Twisted Fate. These champions that provide very unique things that aren't that strong in solo queue, but that are incredibly frustrating to play in competitive. So the one champion that might stick out to you that has low win rate in solo queue that seems uber strong in solo queue is actually Akali. Why Akali is so problematic in pro play is actually her Shroud combined with all her strengths of being an assassin. Like, the Shroud buys you so much time, and time is so precious in competitive play. So you often see Akali dip below 50% in solo queue, and she'll hover somewhere around like even low as like 46-47% while being first pick like almost permaban in pro play. So I mean, Greg does bring up good points regarding fixing things that are broken, but just do know that it is a very modern thing for people to have all these kind of information and be able to pinpoint what's strongest in the current patch.
A lot of the changes we do are of this level of fixing broken stuff / maintenance / updating. To use a really simple example, our live balance patch notes are trying to get at the, Camille came out a little bit strong. It's always a challenge launching a new champion to get the balance just right. Some of our
I have zero doubt in my mind that Riot releases new champions slightly overtuned or majorly overtuned on purpose. They definitely want to sell these champions, and they want players to play these new champions. Like, the worst thing that can happen when a new champion releases is people don't care. People complaining that the champion is OP is actually great for Riot. It means people are playing versus it. It means people are playing with it. It means people are getting emotional response to something new that's happening within the game. Literally, the worst thing that can happen is no one talks about the new champion, no one picks the new champion. There's zero complaints about the new champion. So I think Riot has every single reason in the world to release these champions slightly overtuned.
Champions lately been a little weak. She was a little strong, and so we adjust some of the numbers, hopefully to get it to be a little less frustrating to play against her and make her not 100% banned. At the opposite end of the spectrum is something like our Summoner's Rift update that we did a couple of years ago. The map wasn't necessarily broken.
Wow, this is so cool. I've never seen this video before where it's showing you all like the little grids and showing like how they optimize it. So the grid, the actual hitbox of the terrain is following the artwork a lot better. This is super cool to look at.
Broken, but it was definitely feeling old and creaky and something that maybe was getting in the way of enjoyment. So had our artists work on a fantastic update that was been overall really well received and makes the brings the game a little more into the modern age. We're doing the same thing with a League client right now, just updating an older system into something that'll give us the potential to do cooler stuff and have a game that feels a little newer for you guys as well. A thing we look at a lot are system problems where it feels like the game is supposed to offer you a choice, but there's not really a choice. And a great example of that are item builds.
That's very interesting, because I don't think anyone goes into a League of Legends game whenever they pick a champion and they're thinking about, oh, but your core items maintain the same. And I think that's completely fine for the core items to be the same, so you have the same kind of like power spike, same kind of experience. When there's too many things that are radically different, then it's not that enjoyable of a game. Like in League of Legends, you interact with people and you interact with players and you interact with minions on such a frequent basis. I don't think you need additional choices given to you in terms of like what kind of item build am I going to go.
A lot of the work we've done on the roster updates for things like the the older mage update was trying to make it so that players didn't feel like they just have to buy the same old items every time. At the very least, when you switch champions, maybe you can have a different build order. And if we're, really deliver on it, then sometimes, depending on the situation of that game, you may pick different items. Maybe you need a tankier build. Maybe you need more magic resistance. Maybe you need an earlier power spike. All that is the kind of stuff. The reason we go in and change items and add new items is to try to add more interesting choices to players and solve some of these really fixed build order problems.
I think the fixed build order problems is incredibly hard to balance, because the only time people will make legitimate choices or if those choices are equal in power level and they're situationally different, right? When you have an item as efficient as Ludens, efficient as Lost Chapter, it's really hard to go away from it. And for people to pick up other items other than Lost Chapter or Ludens as first item, like they need to offer something as equally powerful while still maintaining balance, and they're not broken on other champions. So I think that's going to be a near impossible problem for Riot to solve, like allowing multiple viable item builds for almost every champion. So yeah, I wouldn't go too far into it. Just make sure like items are balanced in terms of like classes. Like make sure like the mage items aren't uber OP like they are right now compared to other classes. I think that's more of the direction you guys should take.
Now, that's not to say that every change we make is out there to solve a problem. We do make some changes that are just to add freshness. I really want to make this distinction because most of the changes we do aren't for that reason. Most of the changes are trying to solve specific problems. We really try to stay away from tinkering. League is a game about mastering, getting better at the game. And that can be really frustrating when you feel like the developers are just out there kind of shaking the table all the time. It's like, why bother investing time to get better when Riot's just going to change things anyway?
That's hilarious because I'm personally not a jungler, so it doesn't apply to me that much. But for the jungle role, that role changes on a yearly basis. Like the XP gets shifted around so much, and the item builds get shifted around so much, where it basically becomes a new role almost every year, where you have to learn it completely different, and you have to kind of forget some of the things you knew about pathing. And for them to say like they don't like things changing and like things getting disrupted so much, like the things they do to jungle role on a yearly basis is quite ironic.
But I'll mention a couple examples of things we do more or less just to add freshness and add new levels of excitement. The most obvious one is new champions. Once in a while, we're adding a champion to try to solve a specific problem, like all junglers play the same could be an argument for why to create someone as kind of wacky and out there as Ivern. But for the most part, we add a lot of champions just because they're cool. Maybe they'll be somebody's new main. Maybe it's just a fun reason to log in and play the game.
I think that's actually a great point. Like in terms of like freshness, that being champions, like if there's freshness added in terms of like big sweeping changes to the game, then you're forced to adapt to it and it can be really disruptive. But a champion is a very limited piece of the puzzle. You can ban out the champion. There's champions that are good versus it. And champions can add freshness to the game without it being like really overbearing for everyone involved. So yeah, I agree 100%. A lot of the freshness added to the game should be almost solely through champions and not through other bullshit.
Another example, a totally different example, are the rotating game modes. They're there. We offer them largely as a diversion or a palate cleanser, if you will. I've played a lot of SR. Maybe I played some really hectic ranked games, and I still want to play League, but I just need a little bit of a break. The reason those game modes only last a week or two is they may not have the depth to stand the test of time, but they're a nice temporary diversion or things like that. And finally, I want to
the rotating game mode thing. What to say about it? I rarely play rotating game modes. I'm someone that has like 99% of my games. I would even say 99.9% of my games in ranked, and I rarely play ARAMs. I rarely play like Dominion, like Nexus Blitz, all that things that come out. Like it just doesn't offer that much depth, as he says. And while they are fun in terms of freshness, it gets stale extremely quickly because the game isn't balanced for it. So there becomes like these combinations that become extremely hard to deal with. Or these combinations that are just pure unfun to play against, and Riot never meant for it to exist in the first place. On the topic of rotating game modes, I actually think the solo game modes that they did with Star Guardian and Odyssey were great and amazing, and like those game mode offers so much. Like that single player or PvE experience is something that's missing so much from League of Legends, and I wish they explore more of that, and I wish they spent more time on that than trying to make new fun game modes.
Acknowledge the very real situation that the game evolves even if Riot does nothing. Players develop new strategies. They develop new counter strategies to those strategies. Champions rise or fall sometimes depending on if a pro picked them and did a particularly flashy game with an odd pick, and suddenly now everyone's trying to use that champion.
I mean, Misfortune support that they're showing is a great example. It used to be Zyra was the premier laning support. There was nothing that could beat Zyra in lane, and all the lanes like in that competitive era were stuff like Ashe Zyra, Varus Zyra, and Zyra just dominated bot lane. And then Rox Tigers played Misfortune against Zyra, and Misfortune outranges Zyra, is able to poke out Zyra, and in combination with like Ashe and Varus can actually beat the Zyra lanes, and it was a really cool adaptation to see.
It's honestly a big challenge of this job to figure out when is the community going to solve this on their own, and probably they'll solve almost every problem on their own given enough time. When is the community going to solve this quickly enough that it's not frustrating? And when does Riot need to step in because it's starting to feel like oh, I'm going to see Lee Sin every single game. Yeah, eventually a counter will arise, but I'd rather Riot just get in there and do something now so that, my Thursday game is still fun to play.
Usually it's going to sound really weird for me to defend Riot, but I will defend Riot on this. And I'm actually one of the vocal complainers and people with the voice. People with the voice complaining and like Reddit complaining and like the user base complaining doesn't matter that much to Riot. It honestly doesn't matter that much. And it's when they see play rate drops or when they see significant increase of play rate of a certain champion, where that's when things are actually problematic. So you can see all the Reddit complaint threads, or you can see all like these like creators go on rants on Twitter. But if Riot's data that they have shows that things aren't a problem, then they don't really need to touch it, because it is extreme vocal minority in terms of like people complaining on Reddit. But there are like niche cases like inters and streamers games. Like that's not something Riot's really going to have data on, and that's something they do need to listen to the community and listen to the streamers about. But like most problems, like XYZ champion is OP, Riot has the data on it that are way more accurate than like op.gg and u.gg, so they're not going to act on that unless they 100% feel like they need to from the data they have internally.
So I talked a little bit about why we might make a change and what we're hoping that our changes accomplish in the game, but I definitely want to talk about the fact that there's risk to change too. There are bad things that we can do if we change the game too much. And I'll kind of break those down into 3 or 4 categories. First, the more the game changes, the harder it is for someone who's taken a break to come back to League. And we know a pretty regular play style is I'm super engaged with League right now, and then maybe another game comes out, I'm playing that for a while, but I go back to League. Hopefully the game is still recognizable at that point. And we know that the more we change, particularly dramatic changes like champion select is totally different, or wards are different, or there's a different dragon model in the game, we know that creates a burden for returning players to figure out what's going on.
Why this is such a huge problem for Riot is the number one reason people play League of Legends is their friends play League of Legends. And the number one reason why people stop playing League of Legends is their friends stop playing League of Legends. So if you're trying to bring an old friend back into the game and it's really hard for him to play, then there is a huge potential that Riot also loses you as a customer. So it needs to be very easy for people to come back and play. But the problem is League is a life game. And what I mean by life games is those are the games that are trying to take over your life and make sure you don't play any other games. So most people that play League of Legends will not play other games. Same thing for Overwatch, same thing for World of Warcraft, same thing for Fortnite, same thing for Dota, same thing for CSGO. All these games try to offer you so much depth and so much replayability that you don't have the need to play other games, and you kind of want to just develop your life around that game. So yeah, it's a really hard problem for Riot to solve, where the game has enough depth and enough change so people always want to keep playing it, but it also doesn't change in that dramatic of a way where if someone stopped playing it for a little bit, when they come back it's really hard for them to get into the game.
Now I also want to clarify that our first commitment is to you guys who are super active, who are playing the game now. We don't want to
gamers.
Dumb the game down just for the sake of someone who may or may not come back to League after they've taken a break.
That's actually the retail World of Warcraft problem, where they dumbed down the game, where they made the rewards so easy to get, where people that are playing for a long time and people that are super invested into the game just don't care about the game anymore. That's why they love Vanilla WoW. Like, it's all about the grind. It's all about like it being rewarding. It's all about it being way more hardcore and way more inconvenient. That's what people liked about Vanilla WoW. And the new retail World of Warcraft is just so easy to do and like easy to get through things.
We really have to commit to making sure the game is fun for people who are actively enjoying it. Now that said, there are some things we could do to make the game a little easier to return to for someone who's taken a break. First of all, we've talked about how the initial onboarding experience of League is
terrible.
One of those things that is outdated and something we desperately do need to improve. And that goes for the returning experience as well. We don't do a lot of explaining like, oh, you've been away from the game for a while. Let me tell you about dragons are totally different now. Let me tell you that this champion, hey, Warwick plays pretty differently than the last game you may have played with Warwick. And I think there are ways to do that that aren't just, piles and piles of patch notes. And then also, there are...
I mean, it would just be like a post or like a big window that pops up. Hey, you've been gone for a while. These are Season 9 changes. These are the reworked champions. And then you go through them and it's like a cute, fun graphic. I think that would be my best solution for it.
Fundamentals of League that we want to stay the same. if you log out today and you don't log back in until 2019, the beginning of the game should still probably start with everyone zoning in to the Nexus, and the game should probably end with you getting into the enemy base and doing some damage there.
That's hilarious, because we are actually in 2019, and that's exactly how the game plays out. I mean, you still do load in, and then you still finish the game at the enemy Nexus, and people still whine about things, and NA still sucks in video games and that world. So yes, Greg, things have stayed just the same like you wanted.
Even if the champions change, the items you buy, the way you buy items, all that could change, but enough of it will still feel like League of Legends. So another cost of change is the amount of disruption it can have on players. We do want League to be a competitive game, and that goes from everyone playing ranked all the way up to professional esports. We know that dramatic changes can have a huge impact on players who have spent hundreds of hours perfecting certain plays or strategies, and we try to be very sensitive to that.
I think the thing regarding competitive play and it affecting pro players, if Riot communicated better, which I know they do, they have a Slack channel for all the LCS teams and the LCS managers, and they'll communicate to your managers on like almost a daily basis regarding some of the changes that might be upcoming. And you can talk directly to the designers, and you can talk directly to some of the higher ups at Riot that work on the game through those Slack channels. And there's LPP now. I mean, it kind of shut down. Like, you used to be able to talk to the game developers, but yeah, Riot has definitely opened up way more so in terms of like talking to the people that are way more invested into League. They do listen, or okay, they allow you to give input and feedback, but I'm not sure how much they listen to it, but they do take in your feedback. So it has been better.
I'm sure a lot of you realize by now that we try to focus the biggest changes to the game in preseason and midseason precisely to kind of minimize that impact as much as possible and give you guys a chance to react to the changes and give us feedback to get things in a good spot before it really counts.
I think that's a little bit bullshit, because players have been extremely vocal regarding some of the changes being bad in preseason, and Riot hasn't listened to them. And more so of the feedback that we got, if we know what we're doing, just let it play out a little bit. So the only one change that I can really remember where like the community was extremely vocal and loud about this change being shit, and Riot actually reverted on a relatively quick basis, was the role queue. That's where they actually did listen, but it was also a little bit too late. So not so with you there, Greg.
It's also worth pointing out, like I mentioned before, that we want adaptation to some degree to be an important skill for League of Legends, because the game is going to change, even if Riot doesn't step in. And it's important that, one of the execution is very important to being good at League, but so is just being able to shift as the game itself shifts. Some amount of that we think is healthy.
Yes, some amount of that is healthy, but that's one of the biggest reasons why League has such high burnout rate for pro players compared to other games. Like in other games like CSGO, Dota, and Smash, and other fighting games, people play till they're way old, like all the way into their 30s, and they can still maintain absolute top form. You know why? Fundamentals of those games don't change very much. Where in League, the fundamental parts of the game change so much on a year-to-year basis, so you have to relearn the game, and that's why you have extremely young players being at the top every year and like kind of breaking the meta and like being breakthrough rookies. Is the game changes, and in the new game, those players are putting in more time and more effort about learning about the new game, so the older players are having a hard time keeping up. Should the younger players be rewarded for spending more time and more effort into learning the game? 100% yes, but when the game is changing so frequently and so dramatically that it's hard for older professional players to keep up in just specifically League of Legends, then that's a problem.
And then finally, another cost of change is interrupting the mastery curve. League is a game about getting better at better. Every game you play, you learn something, and you can see yourself improve, and that's really satisfying. And we know that if we step in too much, particularly if it's very disruptive, that players may just lose that desire to adapt. It's like, why bother trying to solve this problem? Riot's just gonna, get in and mess with it in a week or two anyway.
That's how I feel about jungle. Anytime I feel like I want to learn jungle, I'm like, I should wait till preseason until Riot knows what they want out of jungle before spending time into jungle. Or like when champions get reworked, that's like extremely frustrating. So like that one Aatrox player that was like top 10 Korean challenger, he basically had all the effort he put in taken away because Riot changed Aatrox into a completely different character. Champion rework is a huge problem regarding that, so I'm pretty curious if Greg will mention that at all.
I've talked about this a little bit already, but what I really want to focus on is how we try to mitigate those risks. First of all, we aren't just going for incremental changes. Like, if a designer has a pitch to make a champion 1 or 2% better on whatever holistic scale you're measuring with, that's not good enough. We should strive for changes that make the game 10%, 30%, 200% better. That's kind of the scale of how we hold ourselves accountable to making sure we're making changes the game really needs.
What he means is like actual fundamental design changes that will make things 2% better. He doesn't mean like small quality of life changes. If there's a small quality of life change, Riot does implement it. What's like a good quality of life change? Like Twitch poison. Whenever Twitch got reworked and you throw your poison, it will show you kind of a ring around yourself in the range where you can activate your poison, so you wouldn't just have to guess the range. So that's like a quality of life change that Riot will 100% always implement. Things that will just make it easier to play the champion without kind of adding on to the strength level of that champion, like towards the enemy. Like if someone has mastery over Twitch and they know the exact range of the ring without being able to see it, it's still fine for like a new player to kind of have that same kind of mastery just by seeing the ring there.
Now, I know we don't always hit it, and we certainly sometimes break things with well-meaning changes, but we do have a goal. Furthermore, not only do we have a strategy, but we try to have follow-up too. Even the best, well-thought-of, beautiful designs sometimes don't stand a chance once they get out there into the hands of millions of players. So we realize, wow, we thought this was going to work, but we now have evidence that it doesn't, and we need to follow up. That's where the two-week patch cycle can really help, because then if we overshoot or we miss or the idea was just terrible, we do have an opportunity to back it up before things kind of go on too long and maybe get worse and worse.
Another huge reason why people are patching so quickly nowadays and like people want you to play the game so much is because of how the games are like sold to you. Imagine you paid $100 for League of Legends when you first play it, and then you don't buy skins and that's it. You just pay $100 and that's the end of it. I think Riot would have a very different approach to change, and that's why the old school games and the game developers have that idea of we don't need to patch our game as frequently. Like we don't need to get our game in a perfect spot, because once you fork over like your $60 or $50 for the game, and that's all the money they can make off of you. But now for all these games like League of Legends and Fortnite, they can always keep making money off of you as long as you're buying skins, as long as you're interested in the game. So it's also in their best interest to make sure you always want to keep playing the game.
So kind of in conclusion, I talked about how we think about change, and then I talked about some of the risks of change and how we try to mitigate those risks. But one of the points I originally posed was how much change is too much? And there isn't like a super simple answer to that, except to say it's an ongoing discussion. For example, I've learned that as a developer, I am fairly risk tolerant. And the fact that we have the opportunity to follow up with patches makes me feel a little safer with trying something that we have confidence in, but we don't 100% know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But by contrast, Brandon Beck will raise the question of, are we changing too much at once? Are we making it hard for a player who doesn't study every single patch note to really keep up with what's going on in the game? And are we making it, certainly hard for someone who hasn't been, actively playing League lately to keep up with everything that's going on? And my point is not that, this is my call to make or this is Brandon's call to make, more that we talk about this kind of thing all the time. And I don't think there's a right answer. We have to keep challenging ourselves to figure out what makes the most sense for you guys and for League overall. We do make the designers or anyone making a change kind of make a case for why that change is important and how they'll follow up if it doesn't work out. But honestly, this is one of those points where I would love to bring players into the discussion a little more.
I don't know how much he really means it when he says he wants to hear player feedback, because I think most player feedback is absolute garbage. It's not to shit on you guys, but most player feedback is absolute garbage, and it doesn't have really good understanding of the game. And even for LCS and like professional players, like their feedback is absolute garbage. When you talk to game developers, if you can't talk about like core design philosophies and why something is bad, and you can't just say, oh, it feels bad to play against, oh, this is so toxic, like then like you're not really talking to them, you're just complaining. So for him to invite player feedback is pretty meaningless. What is he gonna do? Check the YouTube comments? Like, the lead designer of League of Legends has way better things to do than that. I promise you, he's not looking at your fucking YouTube comments.
We'd love to hear from you. Like, are we changing things too quickly, or do you think that we let stuff go too long sometimes before we step in? So please let us know. So that was a really long discussion. Thanks so much for sticking with me up until now. Really look forward to reading your thoughts.
Sure you are, dog.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm sure you're checking every single YouTube comment in there. Regardless of the legitimacy of his ending statement, I do think this was a good video in terms of like how Riot approaches change and the problems that comes with changing the game and also comes with not changing the game. Overall, other than the whole like jungle getting reworked every year, I think Riot does a good job of like pushing the game forward in the right way. One thing I would recommend Riot is mage items still have been broken for such a long time, and AD carry items have been underpowered for such a long time, and AD carries are going to be in a terrible state going into Worlds. Mark my word, there will not be a lot of AD carry play later and later in the tournament. It's just not going to happen. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this FIFA content. We're going to have a lot more Worlds content coming at you. If you don't know, I'm going to be doing Summoning Insight with Monte Cristo and Doran live at the C9 studios, or the AT&T studios, or whatever it's called. We're going to be doing it in a fully produced studio. It's going to be sick. I hope you guys enjoyed my Loco reacts. And don't forget, I'm not crazy, I'm just Loco. Later, boys and girls.